Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Fantasy Football Universe. I am Aaron St. Denis. Follow me everywhere at FF Mad Scientist. Joined today by Jeremy Shulman at FF_Rebel. We are back for some analysis here. We did a SFB14 mock draft yesterday. The three of us, me, Jeremy, and SC, we each took two different draft strategies, and we stuck to those specifically to see how they play out. We didn't know what strategy each of us was employing. It became kind of evident as we moved on and we kind of played guessing games, but we're going to take a look and, kind of do a quick recap here, maybe 15, 20 minutes, and see what we thought was the most viable. For me, it was early QB. As you can see, I started two early QBs, and then it was paired with mid to late round wide receiver. So I had three here in a row in 4, 5, and 6, and then I doubled back and got one in the 9th round. SC went with the robust running back approach and paired that with late round QB. He had three running backs in the first 4, and then he added in 3 more. So he's heavy on the RB. And like I said, he's got 9th and 11th round quarterback. We only did 11 rounds. We only did the starting positions. Jeremy had bully tight end. That might bully the bully tight ends. He took that a bit too far. And then he went with some late round running back here. So we're going to take a look. Like I said, we're kind of going to ignore the majority of the other teams drafted unless we really noticed an approach that we didn't take. Like maybe we'll discuss some of the teams, like specifically, I would say team 6 and team, 7, 8, 9, 10, I find interesting to me. Team 6 really went with the early wide receiver approach, whereas team 10 went late stack on the wide receiver. So maybe those are worth briefly discussing later, but I guess we'll start from left to right here. We'll start with mine. I don't necessarily love all the players I got, but I don't hate this approach. I've got the two quarterbacks to start. Having said that, my original plan was to go first and third for early QB. But when it got back to me, I liked that Dak, Jordan Love, and Kyler were still on the board. So if any of those three were available, I went with them, which is what I ended up doing here. Having said that, just one sec. I want to see if I can I move your camera back over here without cutting yours off? Let's see, Jeremy. Let's see if I can work. Oh, we're still good. So we can see some of the board here. Yep. Had those three been gone, I would have pushed quarterback to the 3rd round and taken him at the 312 because I really didn't like Purdy, Tua, Goff, Lawrence. I didn't really want any of those in the 2nd round. So I went Allen and Kyler because those were the ones I wanted. Then, like I said, my plan was originally to go wide receiver, from 3rd to 6th round, but I looked at it and I thought Jacobs was good value in the 3rd. I would have also probably taken Henry there. So I grabbed one running back knowing I was going to go 3 or 4 rounds here in a row of wide receiver. Then I went back, grabbed another running back because I think Stevenson was elite value there. Grabbed what I thought was the last of the startable tight ends and then hit my value in Deontay Johnson, which I love. Went with another value running back in Zach Moss and finished with my kicker. So the moral of the story I found with this build kind of was I took my 3 running backs were all guys who I thought were values when I drafted them. None of them are guys I'm particularly in love with, but they're not guys I hate. Like I don't hate if I have to start Jacob Stevenson or Moss. This is more of a build I find where you're loading up at receiver and then you're taking value at every position the whole way. I don't necessarily love any player on this entire roster, but there's no one here where I don't feel comfortable starting them. So what are your thoughts there on how I went with the early QB and mid-round receiver?
Yeah, I think the build works really well here for the Scott Fish Bowl. Even though I like to load up on the running backs, it's hard to argue here with 2 elite rushing quarterbacks at the top in Allen and Murray. Both of those guys are going to have insane value if they are able to stay healthy throughout the course of the season because of, I believe we sorted this out yesterday during the mock draft. It's a 0.25 point per rush attempt. So these quarterbacks, obviously, throughout the course of the season, are just going to get their stats boosted even more. And when you have QBs like this who can run the ball, for a ton of yardage and run it a ton of times with the added component of the fact that they're actually good passers. And they can add kind of normal to good passing volume on top of that elite rushing volume. Those are two great picks. If I'm splitting hairs here, I swap out Henry for Jacobs. I swap out maybe Pittman or Evans for Ayuk, but I don't mind those players there at those values. And I love your wide receiver room. Ayuk, Neighbors, Metcalf, and Deontay late. I mean, those wide receivers there, even though there's less of a premium there, the Scott Fishbowl scoring really makes it so that all the positions are balanced. So it's hard to argue there, especially getting Stevenson and Moss as late as you did. It's hard to argue with any of these players. So I really like this build, and especially if you see in your Scott Fishbowl drafts that running backs go off the board, running backs and quarterbacks pretty much only go off the board with the exception of maybe 2 or 3 tight ends early. It might be a good idea to pick up that wide receiver value.
Yeah, I got to admit, I was the victim of a 30-second clock here and trying to multitask and run the stream. Looking back, I took Jacobs. I would have preferred Derrick Henry or Rachaad White. Even like you said, Ayuk.
It's really close with those guys.
But with Ayuk, I took Ayuk thinking there was a potential to maybe get Pittman back around on me. Like we've seen DJ Moore, Waddle, Collins, Smith. I thought one of that group would fall to me. They weren't, and instead I ended up with Neighbors, who I don't hate, but I like the group above Neighbors and Metcalf much more than I like Neighbors and Metcalf. I think when I made the Metcalf pick, I was hoping Higgins would get back to me. He didn't. Same with Dell, Pickens, like that group. I seem to fall on the end of a few wide receiver runs here, which got me with guys like I don't have a whole lot of Ayuk, Neighbors, or Metcalf. Don't hate them, but don't love them. They weren't the guys. They kind of just fell to me. And then, like I said, the receivers I wanted were gone. So I went with Ramondre. But like I said, I found that the story here was I just took whatever value fell to me. So it's not guys that literally, if you look, I don't think I own, with the exception of Deontay, I don't roster Deontay and Zach Moss at the end there. I don't roster any of these guys on any of my current teams. So they kind of just fell to me. All right. Do you want to move to you next, or do you want to, we can talk SC? Which one? We got 2 teams.
Let's do SC. Let's go to the 105.
Okay, so SC, we think he's not on the show, so we're kind of winging it. It looks like he went with an robust running back build and definitely late QB. So he started off with Bijan, Jahmyr Gibbs. Then he went tight end with Cook Kincaid, added in Isaiah Pacheco, a receiver, Joe Mixon, a receiver, Zamir White. So, and then he has Devin Singletary towards the end. So he has 1, 2, 3, 4. He has 6 running backs out of 11 picks. Ended up with Bijan and Gibbs, which is about the most elite stack I ever seen. If you could, I had a team where I had that in Dynasty, and good Lord, is that lovely. Then he adds in Pacheco and Mixon, who are probably not the most exciting. Even Zamir White, I guess, are 3 guys who aren't the most exciting, but they should be workhorses this year. And I guess you could say that with Singletary if he managed to hold on to the job in New York. Kincaid is his tight end. Then he went really light on the receivers because he went Devonta Smith in the 5th, George Pickens in the 7th. Don't love him, don't hate him. It's a really slim build there. And he went with 2 quarterbacks in his last 3 picks, Bryce Young and Derek Carr, and that is not nearly as sexy as his running back room. You've got the ultimate mid-range QB2 that has no ceiling, and you have Bryce Young who has no floor. So 1 QB, no ceiling, 1 QB, no floor. It's kind of a scary build. It has some potential if Bryce Young can take the next step, but I'm not going to lie. Like, I love his running back room, but overall, if I had to pick, I think I would take my overall build over his. I'm not sure. Like, I don't mind the robust running back approach given these scoring settings. I really do not like the quarterback approach. I don't love the wide receiver. So I just think overall, like, his build, his strength is obviously running back, but I feel like every other position is kind of a weakness for him. Whereas with me, I feel like I don't have a strength or a weak. Like, my quarterback room's my strength, but I feel like the rest of it there is no weakness. It's just kind of a balanced roster that's a heavy QB loaded. His, I feel, is heavy running back loaded, but he's definitely weak at wide receiver and he's definitely weak at quarterback. What are your thoughts on SC's build here?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're pigeonholed based on what we chose to do in terms of our strategies, but here I totally agree with you. The one thing I would change if I could here, and it's hard to do it if you're employing the late QB strategy as we were, but I would trade out Joe Mixon or even Devonta Smith and go quarterback there. I mean, there's a lot of good options still left on the board for Scott Fishbowl. You saw Cousins and Stafford go after them. Even Aaron Rodgers isn't terrible in that range. So I would have preferred one of those guys and then taking Bryce Young where he did. That really helps to maximize your value. You got a steady floor mixed with an upside guy with rushing ability. So, that makes this team kind of elite to me. You got an elite tight end. You got elite running backs, as you went through and mentioned. I prefer Jonathan Taylor over Jahmyr Gibbs in this format just because I think he's going to be fed. We know Gibbs lives off of efficiency. But again, that's splitting hairs. Otherwise, yeah, I really like his picks and his build with that slight tweak of quarterback a little bit earlier if you're in the real deal.
This one is terrifying for me. I also don't think in the real Scott Fishbowl draft that this one would work because I know in these mocks everyone's brave and they're punting quarterback. I don't think Bryce Young and Derek Carr, there's no way two guaranteed starting quarterbacks are surviving until the ninth and 11th round. So I think if in real drafts, those two would have had to go more likely the 6th and 8th or 7th and 8th. I don't think they're going that late. So I think this one's slightly unrealistic. So you, on the other hand, you have the ultra bully tight end and some late round running backs. So you took a quarterback in the 1st and the 9th. You went Lamar in the 1st, Geno in the 9th. You have one wide receiver, albeit it's Rashid Shaheed in the 11th. So he was a wide receiver 2 last year. You went tight end in 2, 3, 4, and 5, stacking Sam Laporta, Mark Andrews, Trey McBride, and Kyle Pitts. So that is the best tight end room you will ever see, probably. If you had just drafted Travis Kelce in the 1st round, you would have had pretty much every tight end.
No
then
thanks.
You went Najee in the 6th, Connor in the 7th, Brooks in the 8th, Tajay in the 10th. So you went elite for the elite of the tight ends, and running back, you kind of went with the undervalued value running back build, which I like because I feel like you have 4 in the late, like 6, 7, 8, 10. All 4 of them, I think, were great values where they went. The only thing I could see, maybe were you hoping that Connor, or not after Connor, were you hoping Stevenson would get back to you for Brooks, or was Brooks your plan all along? Because I think the only thing I would have changed was I would have preferred Stevenson there, but obviously he didn't get to you because I took him. But
yeah, it wasn't necessarily my plan. Like, there's a couple of guys here that I like, who were sniped for me. First of all, I like Najee, but Kenneth Walker for me, I have ranked very highly. I definitely would have taken him if he wasn't taken right before me in the 6th. Najee, a decent consolation prize because, again, I was stacking up those later running backs in my second strategy there. Brooks, yeah, I don't mind him where he fell. I don't think he's going to be available there in the real deal. But, like you said, yeah, I'd prefer Ramondre to Brooks. I'm just not super confident that Brooks plays really even half the season. Just don't know right now when he's going to be 100%. And when they're going to give him the full workload. Once he gets it, I think he's going to be great. He's a great pick for me here as my RB3, maybe as your RB4 or even 5, depending on how heavy you go at the top with running back. He's a smash in that area if he lasts that long. And then Tajay, I just think that, Jesse's been in my ear and all of our ears a little bit much with Tajay over Pollard and his love. So sometimes that creeps into my evaluation. I think it'll still be a 50-50 split no matter what. So it just really depends if that Tennessee offense is good enough. Tajay, we know, is hyper efficient, but in a bad offense, it doesn't always matter. But again, there, JSN got sniped for me. I would much prefer JSN there as my wide receiver 1, who I think will be could be a mid-range wide receiver 2 should be a back end wide receiver 2 this season.
So if you got to make the final 11 picks of this draft in a real draft, I'm assuming out of those 11, 7 of them are wide receivers, and you're stacking like the D hops who are falling or the rookies, and you're just praying like you get some Troy Franklin in there, and you're hoping one of these rookies, is just you strike gold here. Basically, you just stacking wide receivers.
Oh yeah, and I did this last year. Obviously not the crazy bully tight end, but forget who my tight end was. I believe it was Mark Andrews. So obviously I had the tight end position. I think I had 2. I think I had Andrews and maybe it was McBride or Ertz combination or something like that. But yeah, I had those guys, and then my quarterbacks were set, and I had drafted a few running backs. Of course, we hit injury. I think Zeke was one of them, which did work out and then didn't work out. But wide receiver, I was constantly looking for that wide receiver too. I had like Michael Pittman and nobody else at wide receiver. So yeah, in this particular build, I'll just stack a ton of wide receivers and see what hits, looking for value. Pick up another running back or 2, probably a QB3, and then we're good to go.
I find with this build, the upside here is that you're set at every position except for wide receiver. If you happen to somehow stumble onto this year's Puka Nacua in the late rounds, this team may win it all. Because like you're not going to be beat at tight end. You're okay. So quarterback, maybe I don't love Geno as your 2. I think just a sec. I'm going to try and
shift Geno, by the way, this year.
I'm going to shift you up here so we can see the bottom half of the board quickly. So you do love Geno? I would have preferred I would have thought the only one I would have liked between say Cousins and one sec. I'm going to do this again. Let's move me over here now. I'm playing musical chairs here with our cameras. The only one I would have said after Daniels goes, like I think I would have preferred Deshaun Watson. I think maybe had some upside there, but really I don't mind it. Just like I said, for this entire build for you is going to hinge on can you hit with the late receivers. So if you have skill and can identify late receivers, this might be the build for you.
I have it up as well. Quarterbacks still available at this part of the draft. Again, it's a mock. We don't expect them to be, but McCarthy, Levis, May, Russell Wilson, Daniel Jones, Bo Nix. So there's still starters available. And then if you're talking about running backs, you got Brian Robinson, Zeke, Trey Benson, a lot of decent value there. Kendre. And then at wide receiver, you have Cortland Sutton. We don't know what's going on with his situation, but he probably should be the one. Jerry Jeudy was getting hyped up. Shakir, Quentin John, the Chargers wide receivers are still out there. Love Demarcus Robinson. Scott, Demarcus Robinson is my guy. I have him all over the place. One injury to either Kupp or Nacua, and he's going to pop off just like he did for a couple of games last year. So, yeah, love that call from Scott as well. Troy Franklin was still there. Ricky Pearsall, Pop Douglas, so Burton. So there's a lot of great guys still available, and you just need to know or really try to hit on the guys who you think are going to go off. And if they do, like you said, you're solid at the top. You have an advantage somewhere, and that's what you need.
The only one I think is worth discussing here before we call it a day is Team 6. And I get it that it was auto drafted, but I think you may see a couple of builds like this just because there's a lot of people who maybe necessarily didn't read the scoring properly, like fully, and don't understand how much it's changed. And this has become the popular one over the last few years of just stacking wide receivers. I know in this format, it's not a great idea. This team on paper with the start of Lamb, A.J. Brown, Devontae Adams, you've got Nico Collins, Roma Dunze. That is a really lovely wide receiver room. But with these settings,
it is.
I'm pretty sure this is not the build I want to take. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and the fact that you're relying on T.J. Hawkinson, you really need to hit on kind of a late guy at tight end as well. While you wait for him to come
running
back.
back.
Yeah, I mean, Walker's a good one to have. but you do need to find that in case of injury variance. I think the next pick needs to be Brian Robinson. You need to solidify yourself with a starter, and then you got Ty Chandler, you got Rico Dowdle, you got options of guys who could find themselves as the one very quickly with injury, and also
How
have
are
that
you?
contingent upside throughout the season.
How are you seeing what's left on the board? Did you think to screenshot it before it ended?
No, I pulled
Or
up the mock draft, and I have the my mock draft on Sleeper, and I have all this stuff
Oh, okay. So, because I
listed.
kept thinking, I'm like, yeah, you've got a pretty good idea who's left. I'd just be winging it off the top of my head. I hate that. This is my biggest pet peeve with
Yeah.
Sleeper, that it converts like this and it gets rid of it at the end. So, all right. Well, that is
Hang on. One quick thing just to discuss. I did take Shaheed at 11. If you're in a savvy draft room, we might go a little bit earlier. But it's
he
important to
will.
remember that you can punt running back and wide receiver a little bit because of those return yards, right? You can find a serviceable running back or wide receiver much later. I'm not sure how it's going to shake out, but potentially Marvin Mims, if he ends up being the return guy and gets on the field. Let's see, at wide receiver, potentially I don't know if Mitchell's going to be returning anything, Quentin Johnston, but you have guys in both of those positions who are going to be returners for you, who can be serviceable to you, throughout the season. So it's probably better to get at least one top tier quarterback and at least one tight end in the first 3 rounds. That's probably what I would recommend. And then kind of fill in your build elsewhere, regardless of what you do, just because those return yards matter so much this year.
So that was going to be my next question of what do you think your end build would be? And I think I agree. I want to grab at least, I think coming through the first 3 or 4, coming through 4 rounds, I think I want at least one quarterback and one tight end. Through 4 rounds, I'd like to have both my quarterbacks and my tight end, and then just piece the rest
Yeah.
of it together with value. I feel like that's the best. I don't really I get the running backs are good, but I don't really want to be like, SC's build kind of scares me. Your heavy running back. The build that's heavy wide receiver early scares me. I don't know if tight end or quarterback's the position I want to be light at. So I'd rather do what you said and just kind of punt wide receiver or running back and piece it together. There's going to be someone available at some point.
Yeah. And the other thing though to remember in a tournament this size is everyone's gonna be deficient somewhere. Don't worry about where you're deficient. Just try to be super strong everywhere else. So that's why we always recommend take the value that falls to you. That way you ensure you're strong everywhere else, and hopefully you can find something on the wire or some late guy hits for you, and then you can go all the way.
All right, that is a wrap on the Scott Fishbowl draft strategies. We've got some articles, ADP rankings, things like that for SFB. Head over to fantasyfootballuniverse.com if you'd like to check that out, or check back tomorrow. I believe you said we're talking coaching changes and how they relate to the fantasy impact. So check back tomorrow at noon for that. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.